Hello friends, how are you? Hope you are preparing well for your exams. So welcome to yet another video on essay perspectives. The topic for today is our world has achieved brilliance without conscience, friends. So without much ado, so let us get into the topic. Friends, of course, before I get into the topic, I have a personal request, as in all the videos. Pardon me if it is too repetitive and boring. So, friends, my book Ethics, Integrity, and Aptitude for Civil Services Examination has become pirated, and the pirated copy is of very low print quality. Hence, I request all the aspirants to buy only the original book. Original copy can be bought from the seller affordable on Amazon and Arvind Books on Flipkart. Okay, friends, now coming to today's topic, our world has achieved brilliance without conscience. Friends, I want to make a very pertinent point to all the aspirants here. See, most of the aspirants, the moment they see this topic, what they would think, okay, they take it to be a statement and they try to write their essay just justifying this statement, which is actually wrong according to me. See, I mean, to elaborate, to put it in concrete terms, any aspirant, most of the aspirants would design their essay in such a way that they would try to give various dimensions as to how world has achieved brilliance without conscience. They just try to substantiate this statement, they just try to justify this statement, and they just try to conclude the essay with the same statement. But perhaps that is wrong, friends. Actually, as we are all aware, we need to be critical. We need to think from, different dimensions while addressing any issue in the field. Hence, the essays also expect us to think from 2 to 3 dimensions and then only come to a conclusion. Thus, friends, rather than looking at this topic as a statement, that is, our world has achieved brilliance without conscience, you have to look at this as a question, whether our world has achieved brilliance without conscience. Your essay should focus on both the aspects. Your essay should analyze the aspects or the domains where the world has achieved brilliance without conscience, while also focusing on the areas where there is brilliance with conscience. Of course, you should end your essay drawing conclusion from your analysis of both the perspectives. So thus, my first request to all the aspirants and first suggestion to all the aspirants is, don't ever take any topic for essay on its face value. Try to attach a critical dimension to it. Then only you will be able to get more marks. And also, I have followed the linear style for this essay, friends. Let me tell you what is linear style in the next slide. Friends, as you are aware, I first expect aspirants to may conceptualize their essay as being made of components and subcomponents. Here, the first component is introduction, as always, friends. The next component is you have to analyze the reasons why there is brilliance without conscience. And sorry, friends, this is not. And the third component is actually where all the brilliance gets manifested with conscience. Then comes the reasons for manifestation of brilliance with conscience. So, okay, friends, I told you in my previous slide itself that the style that is adapted for this essay is a linear one. So, that means before I get into each component, I would tell you what is a linear one. First, I would give an introduction stating that I would give some examples stating that brilliance is without conscience. Then, I would actually give some reasons for reasons because of which there is brilliance without conscience. Then once I stop at that, then I will also say, though it appears that there is brilliance without conscience, but however we need not have to be limited in our thinking, and we need to look beyond it. Something like that I will write, and then I will talk about the areas or the issues where brilliance gets manifested with conscience, friends. So this, please pardon me, it is with conscience. By mistake, it's a typo error. And then I would say, what are the reasons for brilliance with conscience? Then I will conclude my essay. This is the structure. So okay friends, now let us get into the topic. So our world has achieved brilliance without conscience. So you should give an introduction. So I would say it is better, I would have started this essay by introducing 3 examples of brilliance, achieving brilliance without conscience. So those 3, each of the examples, I mean one of those such examples would be at an individual level. The best example would have been the Opera House East of 1987, friends. All of you have watched the movie Special Chabbis. So what happens? An individual recruits so many people as CBI officers and takes them for a mock CBI raid, and in the process he conducts a heist, he robs a jewelry shop and he runs away. So here the idea employed is brilliant, friends, exceptional idea, but has he used his brilliance with conscience? No. So this example I will write in just 2-3 lines actually. Then second incident will be at an organizational level. Friends, you may all be aware of this court case between Bayer Pharma and Natco Pharmaceuticals way back in say 2014-15 I believe. So where Bayer Pharma had taken patent for a cancer drug called Naxavar, and they were not agreeing to give a compulsory license to Natco Pharmaceuticals to prepare a generic version of the same. So here friends, the drug that was being, I mean, if the compulsory licensing was given, the drug that cost 2.8 lakh would have been available for 8,800, friends. So thus, here it is brilliant, the invention of the drug is brilliant, but the usage of the drug, the overpricing will definitely point at brilliance without conscience, because if the drug is so much overpriced, so many poor patients cannot afford that drug. Then next comes third example is international. So it is the best example is, what can be a better example than Hiroshima Nagasaki bombing, friends, and even the Jallianwala Bagh incident. So Hiroshima Nagasaki, I would say, is the best example, because you have created nuclear weapons in order to protect your country. Of course it's a brilliant invention, no doubt in it, but unmindful usage of that weapon, those bombs on countries, on cities like Hiroshima and Nagasaki has ruined mankind in those areas, and even today people are suffering. So these 3 examples you can write one after the other, just examples, and then you can very well say that all the 3 examples point at the usage of brilliance without conscience. So then you can get into explaining the meaning of brilliance and then meaning of conscience, and then you can establish a link between brilliance and conscience, friends. So basically what is brilliance? Brilliance means extraordinary intelligence or extraordinary talent. What is conscience? Conscience is inner voice of, inner sense of right and wrong. Friends, now once you give these 2 meanings, it is important to establish an explicit link between brilliance and then conscience. Why is it necessary? Because you should make yourself very clear. If extreme intelligence, extreme talent would help a person achieve an extraordinary outcome, but that extraordinary outcome need not be good for every individual. If that extraordinary outcome is not coupled with the conscientious usage, then that outcome can spell disaster to many. That is why every invention, every brilliant act has to be put to use. Has to be put to use by a conscientious sense. So thus friends, brilliance gives you brilliance gives you invention or a discovery, while conscience guides you to use that invention, to use that discovery in the proper ethical way, so that entire humanity, entire mankind stands to benefit from it. So friends, hope I am clear. While brilliance leads to an invention, conscience will lead to the proper use of that invention. If not for conscience, that invention is liable to be put to misuse, it is liable to be put to unethical use. So this is how you have to first give the examples, then give the meaning of brilliance, then meaning of conscience, and then you have to establish an explicit link between brilliance and conscience, friends. Okay, friends, now I told you brilliance means an invention, brilliance means an extraordinary outcome. So, what are the reasons why so many times there is brilliance without conscience? You may very well, on the face of it, it appears that of course I have invented something, I have done some brilliant act, I want that brilliant act to be put to good use. On the face of it, it looks okay. But why is there a scenario? Why is there a situation? Why is there a circumstance where this brilliance is not put to right use? So first you have to analyze the reasons. So first reason I would say, friends, greed, jealousy and selfishness. The inventor, a person possessing the brilliance, wants to corner all the benefits arising out of that invention. Thus, greed is first and foremost thing that will lead to misuse of brilliant act. If not for the greed, a person doing a brilliant act would not mind sharing the fruitful outcomes of that brilliant act with everyone. So he wants to monopolize that the benefits which are spinning off that invention or a brilliant act, and that is the primary reason why there is always brilliance without conscience. And the second thing is also, it maybe you can call it greed, you can call it jealousy also, and you can call it selfishness also. These are the three primary qualities of any individual that would force him or her to indulge in an act of brilliance without conscience. So friends, next comes the lack of sense of collectivism. Of course, friends, it is same as to some extent it is similar to selfishness. However, you can take it as another point and you can dedicate a separate paragraph to it. Friends, actually, this essay can be structured, friends. So you can say, now let us analyze the reasons for brilliance without conscience. And first and the foremost reason is greed, jealousy, etc. And thus you can write some 4-5 paras. Then you can come to the next para and you can write, secondly, the lack of sense of collectivism. So when there is a sense of collectivism, then the individual wants to spread, wants to distribute, wants to share his brilliant act with everyone. But if that lack of sense of if the sense of collectivism is missing, then the individual wants to appropriate those things for himself. Collectivism means community spirit. As against community spirit, there is an individual spirit that is undercurrent in everyone's thinking. And the third point is, so you can dedicate one para on that, and then you can come to the third para, which says lack of unity. The third reason is the lack of unity. That means, or you can very well say, hatred towards other communities. So this hatred towards other communities is the underlying reasons for international disputes, or the disputes, or the fight between majority, or the suppression of minority by majorities. Take the example of Rohingya Muslims, or take the example of nuclear bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, which we have explained. It is only because of that hatred between communities, hatred between countries. So there was usage of brilliance without the application of conscience to it. So this is the third reason. And then comes fourth reason is zero-sum game. What is zero-sum game, friends? Zero-sum game means one's gain is another person's loss. So this is more apt in democratic political scenarios. Brilliant strategies are employed to malign or tarnish the image of opposition leaders. So many times the strategies that are used are brilliant or exceptionally based on exceptional intelligence. Exceptionally intelligent strategies are employed to falsely allege, to falsely malign, to falsely tarnish the image of opposition leaders. So here the main reason for usage of brilliance without conscience is the underlying is the fact that the capture of power is a zero-sum game. If I malign someone else, if I malign an opponent, he will lose that power. His lose is my gain. So then last thing is, friends, unlimited wants versus limited resources. Friends, this is the fundamental problem in economics. Had the wants been limited or resources been unlimited, perhaps there would not have been brilliance without conscience. But now that the resources are limited, whoever is brilliant wants to use that resource for his or her own benefit. Whoever is not brilliant would not be able to access those resources. So these are some of the reasons, according to me. Of course, you can think of many such reasons. So these are the reasons because of which there is brilliance without conscience. So you can dedicate one paragraph to one reason. You can write 3-4 lines on each of them. If you can substantiate each point with one example, nothing better than that, friends. Okay, friends, once you explained all the reasons for brilliance without conscience, now you have to jump to the next component, which is manifestation of brilliance with conscience. Here, friends, I have given one example of linker because I keep telling you the essay has to be broken down into various components and each component has to be linked to the subsequent component using a linker. So just to give a feel as to how this linker has to be used. So now in this you can say, after explaining the reasons, though it appears from the above discussion that there is always brilliance without conscience, but it is not so. There are multiple instances where conscience also has played a critical role in ensuring that intelligence and brilliance are put to proper and ethical way. So you can write like that, and then you can now give the examples, or now you can broach the topic of brilliance with conscience. So here you can again see, this can be some one para. In that one para you have started it stating that though it appears so and so, then you can give some 2-3 examples in that para itself. That para will act as a bridge between brilliance without conscience and the forthcoming discussion, brilliance with conscience. So this bridge, this para should act as that bridge, friends. So then again you can give some examples. The best example that struck my mind was Jonas Salk, the one who invented polio vaccine. He did not patent it, friends. He said that that is his gift to American people, and he also said that just as one cannot patent sun, one cannot patent polio vaccine as well. Because of that, today polio has been eradicated in almost all countries of the world, maybe except 1 or 2, friends. Had Jonas Salk not had the intelligence or the brilliance of Jonas Salk not been guided by his conscience that day, perhaps polio would have been a rampant problem even today. So that is one very good example. And you can also take the example of Banting. Banting is the inventor of insulin. He also sold his patent for insulin for just $1. So that is the reason. Otherwise, so many diabetic people would not have got insulin in time, and there would have been more deaths, diabetic deaths. And then we can take the examples of great cricketers like Sachin and Gilchrist, who have this habit of walking out of the field if they knew that they were dismissed, even if the umpires gave it to be not out. We are all aware, we have all seen. Even when umpires said that it was not out, while the Sachin and Gilchrist knew that they were out, so they just walked towards pavilion. They just walked out. So, such brilliance act. They are all brilliant cricketers, but their brilliance is always guided by conscience. Then at the institution level, you can give the example of Gates Foundation, Infosys Foundation, even Tata's friends. See, Gates Foundation and Infosys Foundation, they are spending a portion of their profit on improving the quality of life of people. So thus, their brilliance, their intelligence is guided by conscience, right? Had it been corporate greed, perhaps those people would have just invested, reinvested, reinvested and made money. Only because of charity, only because of charity, today Bill Gates is not the richest person. Richest person is Amazon's CEO, I think. So, his charitable act, his brilliance being guided by conscience is the reason for Gates Foundation. Same is the case with Infosys Foundation and Tata's. Tata's also, friends, all of us are aware that Tata's, that Taj Hotel was attacked by militants in Mumbai. We are all aware. But afterwards, what happened? Had it been some other corporate group, perhaps they would have just continued with the business. But Tata's made it a point. They ensured that compensation was paid to every person who was affected by that act. Maybe even to those people who are not employees of Tata's, like some pav bhaji vendors outside Tata's and even some policemen who lost their lives in the fight. They ensured that compensation is given to every victim. They took care of every victim. Such magnanimous act is because their brilliance was guided by conscience. At international level also, friends, the international support given by one country to another country during natural disasters is the best example. So, thus, there are instances, there are cases where brilliance and intelligence is guided by conscience, and because of that, such brilliant acts, such inventions have led to greater benefit to the mankind as a whole. Now, friends, once we have now written that para that would act as bridge between reasons for brilliance without conscience, and that would act as introduction to the discussion on brilliance with conscience. So you can very well analyze the reasons why there is usage of brilliance with conscience. Even that means loss of some gain, and even that means some losses and less benefits to the person who indulges in brilliant act or intelligent act. The first reason is loss. We are all aware that we have to abide by laws. These are the laws that will ensure that brilliant acts are guided by one's conscience, because conscience is a internal sense of right or wrong. Collective internal sense of right is something that is normally codified into something called laws. So thus, mandatory CSR provision that is made a part of New Companies Act 2013 is the best example of intelligence or brilliance being guided by conscience. Next, there are international organizations, international conventions that will ensure that brilliance is not used without conscience. There are conventions like Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty that puts a check on unmindful usage of nuclear weapons. And the role of international organizations in peacefully resolving the international disputes between countries is also the best example. If not for international organizations, perhaps the fear of sanctions, that would follow if the conventions are not followed or not adhered to, then there would have been more wars, there would have been more skirmishes in this world. And third is impact of religion. Friends, all of us know, all of us are influenced by religion, one or the other religion in one or the other way. Interestingly and thankfully, every religion, the underpinning of every religion is Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. Though it is told in Hindu mythology, the same thing applies to all the religions. Every religion strives for a peaceful world. Every religion aims for a peaceful world and also betterment of the entire mankind rather than betterment of one particular sect or community. So thus, so many times the impact of religion would lead to usage of brilliance with conscience. That religious bent of mind that is underlying in every individual, or the individual who indulges in brilliant act, would lead him to lead him in a proper and ethical way. Similar is the case with social norms, value systems, morals. These value systems, morals and social systems are some things that will ensure that brilliance is not put to unethical usage. And in concrete terms, with regard to politics, friends, the doctrine of checks and balances, if not for, our democratic systems across the world mostly have competing institutions being created by the constitution. Crossing the line by one institution is checked and balanced by some other institution. If not for these checks and balances, one institution would have become very powerful, and that institution, using its brilliance, would have indulged in some act without conscience and leading to miseries to mankind. So in order to avoid that, the principle or the concept or the doctrine of checks and balances has been inbuilt. So the best example is Public Accounts Committee, judicial review, etc., etc., etc. So thus, these public accounts committees, judicial reviews, they will definitely act as a forum, they will act as mechanisms, machinations that will ensure that the brilliance of executive is not put to use without conscience. Again, friends, in this also you can dedicate one small paragraph, one paragraph to laws, one paragraph to international organizations, one to religion, one to norms, one to doctrine, and many more points. So like that you can write. So okay friends, now you have explained the reasons for brilliance with conscience. Now as a penultimate paragraph you can add some of the steps to be taken to promote brilliance coupled with conscience. So thus a few points are moral education, promoting moral education in schools, promulgation and enforcement of strict laws, and also whatever points that I have already told, if those things are promoted, then that will lead to brilliance coupled with conscience. So you can add just one penultimate paragraph. So these 2 points need not have to be restricted to only 2. Only these 2 points could strike my mind, but you can add more points actually. How to promote, how to ensure that brilliant acts are applied or used only with conscience. Then you can conclude, friends. So you can very well conclude. Now you know what have we done. We have first explained brilliance without conscience, and then we have discussed brilliance with conscience, and also we have given some points as to how this brilliance with conscience can be promoted. So conclusion can be from the above discussions, it can be fairly derived that the brilliant acts are very much essential for the progress of mankind. However, such progress needs to be conditioned by conscience. Such conditioning by conscience can lead to a better tomorrow for the future generation. Something like that you can write, and you can conclude this essay. So hope friends it has made sense. So intentionally before I close, I want to just make one point very clear, friends. This is a very good essay topic, but however, the moment you saw the topic, some people would have just justified or just substantiated the topic given rather than critically analyzing whether that is true or not. If you also just conclude stating that our world has achieved brilliance without conscience, then there is you will not get good marks. You will have to say that it is not always true that the world achieves brilliance without conscience. There are so many mechanisms that have been designed to infuse conscience into brilliant acts. So that's how you have to balance both the things, and you have to be critical of the topic, and then you have to come to a conclusion, friends. So hope I have made very clear. All the best. Thank you.